Ever been so sure about something, then bam, doubt hits you at the worst time. Like when you're about to make a big decision or life throws a curveball and suddenly you start questioning everything.
Yeah, doubt. It's something we all deal with, right? And it's not just for people who aren't religious. Actually, today, we're looking at a guy who faced doubt head on, and his story, it's got some surprising insights for everyone, no matter what they believe.
Okay, so we're talking John the Baptist, right?
Yeah.
The guy who basically prepped everyone for Jesus.
Exactly. I mean, John, he wasn't just some random dude. He was the link between the Old Testament prophets and Jesus coming on the scene, talking about the Messiah, telling people to repent, then boom, baptizes Jesus.
And let's not forget what happens right after. Talk about a confirmation, the heavens open, a voice says, "This is my son, love him, I'm happy with him." Like, if that doesn't lock in your faith, what will?
You would think, wouldn't you? But the really interesting thing about John's story is that his doubt doesn't happen out in the desert before he meets Jesus. It happens later when Herod's got him locked up in prison. John, he sends his disciples to ask Jesus straight up, "Are you the one, or should we be looking for someone else?"
Wow, to ask that after everything John had seen, it's
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, wasn't that voice from heaven enough? What made him suddenly unsure?
That's the big question, and there are a few things to think about. Some scholars figure John was testing his disciples' faith, making them go to Jesus themselves for confirmation. Others think maybe John, knowing he might die, wanted to make absolutely sure his followers switched over to Jesus completely.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
I can picture being one of those disciples, going to Jesus with that question, carrying the weight of John's doubt, their own uncertainty, and knowing Herod could kill them. Talk about pressure.
Totally. But what's important here is that the Bible doesn't slam John for doubting. It doesn't act like he's not faithful because of his questions. By including this story, it's like the Bible saying doubt is just part of being human, even for someone as important as John the Baptist, the last prophet of the Old Covenant, right there as things were about to change forever.
That's really interesting. So we're not supposed to have it all figured out. Doubting isn't some kind of spiritual failure. It almost feels like permission in a way.
It is. Doubt, it's not the opposite of faith. A lot of times, it's actually a step on the way to having stronger faith. John's story reminds us that even the most religious people can have times when they question things, especially when things are tough and uncertain.
So if doubt is normal, maybe even good for our faith, how do we handle it? How do we keep those questions from overwhelming us?
And that's where the story gets even more interesting because it comes down to how Jesus responds to John's doubt. And that is something we will get into when we come back.
All right, so John the Baptist is in prison questioning Jesus. I got to say, if I'm Jesus at this point, I might be a little, a little irritated. Like, hello, voice from heaven, the miracles, getting everything ready for you.
Yeah.
And now you're sending your disciples to ask if I'm the real deal.
Right. You'd think he'd be a little annoyed, but that's what's so amazing about how Jesus reacts. He doesn't yell at John for not having enough faith or just ignore his doubts. Nope. He starts performing miracles right there in front of John's disciples.
Like, oh, you need proof. Check this out.
Exactly. Healing people, making blind people see stuff that was predicted about the Messiah. It's like he's saying to John, "You want to know who I am? Pay attention. What I do, that's the real answer."
That is powerful. And not just for John, right? It's like this truth that applies to everyone. Sometimes just talking isn't enough. It's what we do, the choices we make, that shows who we are and what we believe.
Exactly. And it makes you think about how God handles our doubts too, right? He doesn't always give us all the answers right away or make our doubts disappear magically. Instead, it's like he's saying, "Look at what I've already done. See how I've come through before. Trust that I'm working even when you can't see it."
I really like that. But let's talk about what we actually do when doubts pop up. How do we deal with them in a way that makes our faith stronger instead of getting stuck in uncertainty?
So there's this analogy I really like. Think of doubt like someone who comes to visit you. It's totally fine for doubt to show up every once in a while. Sometimes it can even mean your faith is growing, which is good. We can be cool with it, let it in, hear what it has to say.
Okay, I can get on board with that.
Mm.
Not trying to completely block out doubt. We're acknowledging it, dealing with it in a good way. So then what?
Ah, that is the question. And it's what we are going to get into right now.
This whole doubt as a house guest thing, I'm really feeling that. Like, yeah, come on in, doubt. Let's hang out. But how do we keep this guest from staying too long? How do we keep doubt from just taking over the whole place?
You got it. And John the Baptist story, it shows us how to handle that. He sends his disciples straight to the source, to Jesus.
So it's like he's saying, look, I have these questions, these doubts, But instead of keeping them bottled up, I'm going to the one person who can give me answers.
Exactly. And that's a big lesson for us, too. Doubt's going to come knocking. We all know that. But we don't have to struggle with it alone. Just like John sent his disciples to Jesus, we can take our doubts to God.
I used to think prayer was all about coming to God, like perfectly put together.
Yeah.
But when you put it like this, it's like, wait, God can handle my honesty. He can handle my questions, even the tough ones, even the ones that shake my faith a little bit.
Absolutely. Actually, you know what? I'd say it's when we're being real, coming to God with open hearts, even when we're messed up, that's when real change happens. Think about it. Jesus didn't get mad at John for doubting. He showed him compassion and answered in a way that made the disciples believe even more.
That makes me feel better, knowing that our doubts and questions, they don't scare God away. He wants us to bring them to him, like it's part of having a real relationship.
That's it. Like any relationship, sometimes you got to have those hard talks, ask the difficult questions, and trust that even when things don't make sense, even when we're not sure, we're still loved.
So what I'm taking from all this is that doubt doesn't have to be this big, scary thing that destroys faith. It can actually be like an invitation to dive deeper, to really wrestle with what we believe and come out stronger on the other side.
Well said. And remember, having faith is a journey, right? There are going to be mountaintop moments where everything's clear and then those valley times when doubt creeps in. But through it all, God is there with us every step of the way, and he wants us to bring our whole selves, doubts and all, to him.
And with that, we're going to let you continue your own deep dive. What's on your mind? What doubts are you dealing with? Don't shy away from them. Explore them. And most importantly, take them to God. Trust that he can handle your honesty and will meet you right where you are. Until next time, keep searching, keep asking those questions, and keep the faith.